Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here. Now for this podcast I'm joined by author Mark O'Connell, who recently had his latest book published called Watching Skies. It details Mark's childhood as he reminisces about his experiences with Star Wars, E.T., Superman and the joys of owning a VCR during the early 80s. Mark is no stranger to writing. His work has been featured on the BBC, Channel 4 and 5 and various film festivals. This isn't Mark's first book either. He got a lot of attention for his previous publication on 007 called Catching Bullets, Memoirs of a Bond Fan, which received rave reviews from the likes of Total Film and Starburst. Mark, like me, is a huge fan of 80s movies. He is very knowledgeable of all these great classics. The book isn't just listing trivia about these movies or even interviews. For hardcore fans, they already know about the production problems on Superman the movie and the issues Spielberg had with the shark on Jaws. Mark offers a different perspective on these films with a clever critique and a huge slash of nostalgia, with his own experience seeing these blockbusters for the first time. So Mark, welcome to my channel, and how are you doing, sir?
I'm very good. Hello. Thank you for asking me along.
So Mark, what spurred you on to write this book? Did you feel there's a lack of books around that detail people's experiences with these movies and growing up in the 80s in the UK in general?
Well, there's just not enough books about Star Wars. I just thought, there's a gap in a shelf on every Waterstones. No, like you say, I'd done the Bond book, and that's done really well and sort of framed me as sort of nostalgia revisitor, for want of a lot of better words. And I'd always thought, and people always said, what was this next book? Where would you go next? And I always thought Spielberg or Star Wars. And then the publisher sort of loosely suggested, what about doing a Star Wars book? And I thought, well, to me, Star Wars is so tied, oddly, with Spielberg and that late 70s Lucas, Spielberg, Richard Donner era. So it sort of came from there. It was like a lot of things. It was like happenstance and a good amount of luck and timings.
I mean, from reading your book, you had a very good memory from a young age. It seems clear come 1982, I think you have a strong memory of what was going on around you. I mean,
Yes.
For me, it was like around 1989 when I was 7, recalling the desperation to see Batman at the cinema, but being too young, watching repeats of Masters of the Universe and Batfink on Whack-A-Tay, and and seeing Return of the Jedi figures still being sold in Tesco's that year. So, I mean, 82 is that sort of crunch point for you when you started, I think became very clear to you?
Yeah, it was. I saw E.T. the sort of December of that year, and I remember it vividly. And also, I remember it vividly because of other things, which obviously the book goes into. Some of them a bit sad and a bit tragic, sort of personally in terms of family. But yeah, so 82, 81, Christmas 81 onwards. And I look at my godsons now, and they're sort of 8 and 10, and they don't remember what they had for breakfast. So I do find it odd. I've always had a good memory, and being an only child, maybe you sort of remember things more. So yeah, I don't know why I remember stuff, but that's sort of the way it did. So, but 82, that sort of winter of seeing E.T. for the first time, and also seeing some of Star Wars: New Hope on television for the first time when it was broadcast October 82.
Yeah, because you didn't see Star Wars, did you? Till I think was it 84? I think it was.
Yeah.
Was it the Christmas screening or was it a VHS rental?
It was a friend's dad had taped it on this newfangled household machine called a VCR, which was a mystery to me then, almost is now. And it was, he taped it. I saw the Star Wars films all slightly out of sync. I saw Jedi, New Hope, and then Empire late. Yeah, Empire, as the book sort of lovingly details, was a film that evaded me and eluded me for various reasons. Some of them my bad behaviour at weekends. Others were just video stores that would insist on having one copy of Empire Strikes Back, but like 10 copies of Emmanuel 2, which was always a sort of confusion to me. So that's the order I saw them. But I always say, and I say this about Bond as well, I don't think it matters what your entry point is to a franchise. It's the important thing is that you had one.
As we were discussing this before we start recording, but there is a chapter, dedicated to Supergirl the movie, of all things, which made me smile, because there's because you've got great segments where I think what's happened with sort of nostalgia, if we need people to think of 80s nostalgia, when they do these great kind of collages of kind of montage of all these movie posters, Superman is never part of it because he's part of late 70s kind of culture.
Yeah.
But Superman, I think for think for most kids, even especially British kids, Superman the movie and the sequels are very much part of 80s growing up.
Yes, yeah,
and
absolutely.
it seems to have kind of disappeared from that. And reading this book and seeing you discussing these films with a lot of passion, and seeing a section on Supergirl was just like, wow, this is like, you were experiencing this movie when it came out. I think it was was it Scotland? I think
I saw it on the hottest day I've ever experienced in Glasgow, and I went into a cold, unair-conditioned Odeon cinema, which is random. But you're right. I part of me would do a whole 4-volume, sort of expose of Supergirl. So I've got a bad passion for it. But yeah, no, I do like Supergirl a lot. Yeah, it was the first Sal Kind caped movie I saw at the cinema. Then followed by Santa Claus the movie, not that he wore a cape, and then that film called Quest for Peace that no one saw in '87.
Because reading through your book, it was great kind of finding these points when these movies were kind of exposed to us, especially because when you talk to people who were born in the 70s and were kind of old enough to go see a lot of these films at the cinema, such as E.T. and Superman and things like Ghostbusters. But a lot of people didn't get a chance to see them at the cinema because of the delayed release, or like the cinema, there'll be like sort of sporadic releases around the UK, and you have to try and catch it when it comes out on TV or video. But it was interesting, sort of, you were sort of poring over like the Radio Times, trying to figure out what movies were going to be playing, but also trying to catch like other Star Wars. And then Superman was on. That was the first time you saw Superman, was at the Christmas showing on ITV.
Yes. Yeah. One of our nuns at school said, literally as we were going out the door for the Christmas break, and I was aged probably 7, 8 at the time. She went, "Don't forget to watch Superman at Christmas." And we're like, shouldn't she be saying the Ten Commandments or some Jesus nativity movie? But although there are obviously parallels with all of that. So it was Christmas '84 that I saw Superman the movie for the first time, and it was all out of sync. And you're right, we didn't. It's hard to believe now because films have such a strict window of time, and then they're gone, and then they're on sort of DVD platforms. 6 weeks later, 2 months later. But films would hang about more. I think maybe there was less control, but I'm not entirely sure, but less control by the distributors. So a print would bounce around the country, and a film that maybe even been on telly would crop up at your local cinema just because they were filling in a gap for a few days. And there were less films as well. There was less films blocking the multiplexes, so they could share them around and hold them on for longer.
I think one of the highlights for me when reading your book was when you got your first VCR from Rumbelows, I believe, starting your obsession to record pretty much everything movie related that came your way, even sort of TV specials.
Anything just visual. I remember taping loads of TVM. Why? And I wish I'd kept those tapes now. In the same way, I wish I'd not punched out all the adverts, because those adverts are just gold. And thank you for sending me on a rabbit hole odyssey of old 80s videos the other day with that link we were talking about. But I would just literally tape TVM because I could, and then I would start to tape some movies more religiously. And it was Raiders. It was Christmas Day '84 on ITV. That was one I remember sort of really, because I was aware the tape that I had wasn't long enough to tape it with ads, so I was trying to shrink it. It was horrible. But you did have that little rotating sort of psychedelic square on the top right hand corner of the TV screen, which would indicate the ads are coming. Because my parents would always say, "How do you know?" I'm like, "Can't you see the big gaping sort of thumbnail in the corner of the screen ruining the image?"
Because I sent to Mark an old upload. Well, it's an upload of sort of these old advertisements for what films were playing on ITV in the 80s. And once you sort of click on one and you sort of think, "Oh, I remember that clip," and then you sort of go down the rabbit hole, and I found tons of this like random movie premieres. And the one I sort of avidly remember was the surprising turnaround, actually, because when Batman came out in '89, in '91 the BBC broadcast it as a TV premiere, and that was
we all thought that was the Adam West one. We all thought that can't be the one. What, 2 years? But I think they paid a shed load of money for that.
They really did.
It was a big event as well.
Yeah, because it was obviously finding out in your book actually about the sort of turnaround for E.T. as well, was sort of the video release. I think there was kind of because obviously it was heavily pirated during the 80s, wasn't it?
Yes, so they kept that back till sort of the fall of '88. and then I think BBC played it, I want to say Christmas Day 1990, because they actually had a great Spielberg season, which is when, as a Spielberg fan, I managed to scoop up all these films I hadn't seen, like Sugarland Express, and I think they showed Duel as well. So Christmas 1990, I mean, that's 8 years after E.T., but that was more because perhaps it was almost one of the last films that was kept in the vaults of brilliance. So it was the idea of keeping it at arm's length gave it a bit more gravitas, oddly.
Yeah.
But those ads, I wish someone needs to do a mashup sort of montage of all of those ads, particularly the ITV Christmas announcement guys, because there's a cracking one where this real plummy English chap is sort of saying, and join us at 9:30 on Boxing Day night as Sigourney Weaver fights an alien on the Nostromo. It's all very sort of like a completely different era of communication.
It really was, because you go from the sort of 60s and 70s, very dusty, very posh voices for these voiceovers. They always were, but then it's sort of the 80s. It has a little bit appeal to everyone, but it was always just the wrong person doing the voice to sort of announce a really big movie. Yeah.
And they're really proud of really old movies as well. And Boxing Day at 6:40, join us for Ryan's Daughter. I'm like, that film's about 20 years old. Please.
It was funny because ITV had all the Superman films. For me as a kid, my memory was always like BBC, but I think BBC only showed Superman 3, I think, and that was it. Or maybe they showed Superman the movie over New Year's.
I'm sure I've remembered this right, that Superman 3 actually had quite a quick turnover when it came to ITV, and I want to say of September 85.
Yeah, it is. I think you're right.
Because it was the first week I'd been back at school, and I'd say it in the book, and I remember it vividly, that I hate football and all sports involving balls and things that can smash your face apart. So I remember literally I was put in goal because I was big and tall but wouldn't catch the ball, so I was always put in goal. And the only thing that got me through it was knowing that Superman 3 was going to be on television that night.
Did Superman 3 sort of break your heart when you first saw it? Did you fall in love with it? Like, well, a lot of the kids did enjoyed Superman 3 when it came out, but it's interesting to know, as you were a kid sort of growing up, was it something you'd expected?
No, I loved it. I liked it. As you look back at it now, and it's a strange film. It's a Richard. Well, it doesn't know what it wants to do, and I do think that custard pie in the face over the phrase "directed by Richard Lester" sort of sums it up, because there's a weird sort of tone, and it might have been quirky and kooky with the Beatles down the old Kent Road in the 60s, but it didn't work for me. So you've also got all these British sort of comedy actors, Bob Todd and Graham. I can't remember his name. Graham, what's his name, popping up, all because they're just pals of Richard Lester.
That's right. Yeah.
But no, I wasn't disappointed. But I remember being disappointed that it wasn't Gene Hackman, because it felt like it was Lex Luthor and all, but wig. So yeah, but no, I loved it, and that's partly what I like about Supergirl, or Supergirl 84 as we probably have to class it now. That it was one of the few films that the production wasn't screwed up, because obviously they made Superman the movie and Superman 2 with the plan of doing them back to back. That got hampered. Then they replaced Donna with Lester. So yeah, if you look at sort of Supergirl, it's the one that doesn't get screwed over, alongside Superman 3, and then obviously Superman 4 is just this weird sort of £4.90 Superman movie.
Yeah, Tesco value version, isn't it?
Well, it's more Lidl actually, I think. Or sort of Tesco's Basics. Yeah.
The challenges for you writing this book, I mean, because were you sort of self-conscious about end up providing too many facts about a particular movie you love, feeling that you are informing an audience that already know about this, as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, but yeah. it was you trying to sort of stay on track about your own personal experience with this movie and how you saw it when you first saw it, or how you've kind of viewed it over the years and sort of accumulated your own sort of new critique on it.
It's to give you a really terrible answer, it's all of that. Bond, I had a sort of ownership. I always say Bond represented home and family for me, whereas Star Wars, Superman, Spielberg, they represented mates I grew up with who I still can go out with and get on with. So I was very conscious of going back to big films and reappraising them and just trying to it's more than re-review them, but why were those films so good? Why is Poltergeist still one of the best horror films? Why has Raiders got an immaculate sense of pace and purpose to it? So I wanted to just sort of go back without moaning that new cinema is terrible and that, you know, Crystal Skull is terrible, which I don't think it is, and I don't think Man of Steel is that bad. Justice League will pass, but so that was a big thing, to go back and look at films where everyone had a very staunch opinion on them, because, like what the book is highlighting and hopefully celebrating, that we all have such a personal connection with these films. But then it wasn't just because we were young. I don't think some kids are gonna, well, I could be wrong, but I don't think there'll be a book in 30, 40 years time about growing up as a Marvel fan. Actually, they probably could, but I think we were very lucky, sort of the Sky kids or the 70s, 80s kids, that there was that window of cinema from sort of 75 to 84, 85, but it let in a hell of a lot of big cinematic light that has changed cinema. You know, Star Wars didn't just change special effects; it changed the thinking of when films come out in the year, and then when Star Wars and Superman and Jaws went to VHS, that sort of emancipated the movies. That was when the movies would come to us almost. My parents' generation, they would go to the movies, but Star Wars was a film that came to us, whether it was the toys, the duvets, the sticker books, the cereal boxes, and then the VHSs. So that's sort of what I wanted to do. Sorry to sort of give you many answers to that question.
No, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. I mean, as a kid growing up, did you sort of, because of your obsession with a particular movie, would you try and seek out everything that you could find on that film? For example, that sticker album, or you got the movie program or the lobby cards. Was that sort of sense around that stuff around you at the time, or did you have to sort of really dig deep to find this stuff?
Well, in differing films, I had different levels of passion for. Star Wars was always, after Bond, Star Wars was always my thing. So I would want the photo storybook of Return of the Jedi and insist on taking it on holiday with all my figures to Crete, because that's what you do when you're 8 years old. But it was also bound by what was available. I lived in a very small little Surrey village. We were lucky. We had a great 1930s Art Deco cinema that survived till about 2003. But, you know, what my sort of cinema fandom in terms of merch and getting books would often just be down to, you know, what did the local garage have, which stickers did it have, and if it had the Gremlins sticker book, I'd get involved in that, and or the Return to Oz sticker book. I remember collecting that from Total Garage, and I think in the end they ended up just giving them to me because I was spending such a fortune on one. My memory from 1988 was running down the street to the local paper shop to get stickers for my Masters of the Universe, the movie sticker album, and I found the book like 6 months ago, but it was, you can see when I was how young I was, because the stickers were so poorly put in. Oh,
and I've stuck on the back like Weetabix stickers as well, with those little characters that were made out of Weetabix. That was bonkers. I was.
But isn't that part of the charm of it? Like, I think an unfinished Panini movie sticker album is more interesting. Like, I've got Return of the Jedi one, which to be fair, barely started. But the gaps are what are interesting. It's a bit like the ads on 80s TV, you know, films we've taped off the TV. Those ads and the gaps have great nostalgia now and great sort of sense of ephemera.
Yeah, because I bought the Batman Forever sticker album. And I thought to myself, I think shortly after buying it, I was like, I'm too old for fucking stickers and stuff. You know, I barely bought any for it. That was kind of the last sticker album I ever bought, actually.
Well, my other half got the London 2012 album, and I'm like, I'm not doing swapsies. I'm not stopping people in the street and saying need got. You're doing that on your own. And he did. He went through it, and he finished it, and I went, I actually find a finished Panini sticker album a bit strange, because I never finished them.
You gotta send them a check with all the ones you're missing to get that complete. That's what I did once.
I was thinking of doing that with my Return of the Jedi ones.
They might still have them, you know.
That little address, and just see what happens. Here's my 17p check for the remaining 31.
Wait, it could work, because I had a Street Fighter 2 one from the early 90s, and 5 years later, I sent them a check in the post, and I came back with massive wad of stickers, and I was like, oh my god, I was actually able to complete it. and that was
right.
that
No,
was
I'm
balmy.
doing this. I'm doing this. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Supergirl sticker album. I will complete that.
Oh, I don't know if there was one.
I don't think there was.
I would have been
no,
all
it must
over
have
that.
been.
Yeah,
I think there's Topps trading cards. I think there was something like that.
Yeah, I was fascinated by Supergirl because that was the era also where we would have like the making of, and there'd be an hour-long special.
Because that was a
And it would
discussion
give
you
away
had in the book, didn't you,
yeah.
about watching that?
It would give away everything, you know, like the trailers often did. But they were really proper in depth, often no holds barred with their opinions and attitudes. Nowadays, most of the documentaries we get behind the scenes are fluff pieces, you know, explaining how brilliant they are. But I remember the sort of Supergirl one with lifting Helen Slater on these wires that were killing her back across Black Park rather, and the lakes nearby. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny what you remember. I also remember how Faye Dunaway. It's on YouTube. You've got to look up the making of Supergirl, and there's an introduction by Faye Dunaway, and the lighting is just bizarre. It's sort of this strip of lights. Apparently, she was very keen on certain type of lighting, and you can see that in the film as well.
Oh, she's got that sort of Morticia Addams kind of lighting going on around her eyes all the time.
Yeah, but the documentary where she introduces it is even stranger. Yeah.
Because I never actually saw any of those Superman or Supergirl sort of making ofs. I think they've probably stopped repeating them by like 85 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. There's another great one. I think Superman 2 with Christopher Reeve, and he's walking along a pavement at Pinewood just outside towards the gardens, and I insisted that we got some of our wedding. I got married at Pinewood, and some of our wedding photos should be done in that sort of hedged pathway there, because I remember him walking along introducing it, you know, in his jeans and his anorak, saying, "Hi, I'm Christopher Reeve. There's a Superman movie, and this is how we made it."
Yeah. Was another interesting thing was when you were growing up, because you'd seen Ghostbusters. You know, this was a movie that was kind of particularly scary for children, but it was kids were able to see it. It was a PG-rated film, but then you were waiting with anticipation for Spielberg's next sort of production, and that was Gremlins. And that was slapped with a 15 certificate, which really kind of pissed you off, I think, at the time.
Yeah, because we would have the Panini stickers and the toys would be available, and it made no sense that the film was sort of held at distance by that big sort of horrible 15 logo. And nowadays the film, it's all right with a few cuts, but it crops up at like 11 o'clock in the morning on Boxing Day on Channel 4. Strange how times change, but then they were obsessed. There was a big 80s paranoia about video nasties and kids seeing stuff they shouldn't, and it was all it did was just make us want to see it more.
That's true. I mean, as soon as my father said you can't watch RoboCop, I'm going to watch RoboCop. You know, it was, try and sneakily kind of watch it, and I was terrified. I was completely freaked out by the gore and stuff. But I think most of us, when you're seeing these kind of 18-rated movies or 15-rated movies, are always kind of seen by or adored by people who saw them when they were younger. And
I remember seeing Omen 3: Final Conflict when I was about 9 or 10, and it scared the bedamian or the bejesus out of me, because it was those charred babies in the pram when all the priests are trying to sort of track down, I don't know where Damien is or his disciples are, and that just haunted me forever. But I would not have not seen that movie at that time. And I don't think kids are going to be watching really horrific. No 8-year-old's going to sit through Hostel 3. I think it's important to see some things slightly ahead of time. My 7-year-old godson was really proud he'd seen Jurassic Park and didn't turn away at all of it, bless him. So yeah, a little bit of fear didn't do anyone any harm.
So when growing up, like most of us, we have to get rid of certain toys or things in our collection, either to make a bit of money, to pay for bills, or just to get rid of stuff to sort of clear out clutter. Did you? Because I lost a lot of my Star Wars toys during this sort of my grumpy teenage years, sort of getting rid of it just because I didn't need it anymore. Then I basically regretted it from years then on. Did you lose a lot of your Star Wars stuff during that sort of transition as you were getting older? Not
one pistol or Ewok spear. Actually, that's not true. I did lose probably some Ewok spears along the way. No, I didn't. I think maybe I was lucky. I was an only child, so there was less reason to sort of clear out stuff. And I don't know, maybe I just had this feeling that, a Star Wars figure, I put them in an ice cream tub for 10, 15 years, and the ice cream tub was fascinating. I was like, oh my God, is that a flavour we could have then? So actually, no, I just, having loft space and just throwing them up there. My mum did go to throw out all my Star Wars stuff when she was moving house, and she went, "You don't need any of this." And I looked in it, I was like, Jesus, it's like, X-wing and the AT-AT looking like a sort of lost puppy that needs some care. So I just took it all. Now it's just filling up another loft. But no, I didn't get rid of too much. I lost 12 Star Wars figures on a trip back from Crete, a family holiday, which was pretty horrific stuff, and I never got to fully replace them either.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was one of the book goes into at one point. We were in a taxi late at night, and I left my whole bag of 12 Star Wars figures, and they were never recovered. I never replaced them all either. And when I did, Bespin Luke didn't quite look the same. He was a bit boss-eyed. Wasn't as perfect as he was before. But I got this vision that there's this sort of dusty Snoopy backpack at Luton Airport in lost property that's, that no one's claimed yet.
That'd be amazing if someone found that. We touched upon things like Superman and Star Wars, but obviously Spielberg is a very important part of your book. Was there something you wanted to bring across about
not
your passion for that?
I just one thing I've tried to do in the book is, I always say this with all my movie fandoms and the franchises that I'm into, along with everyone else, that to be a shepherd, not a sheep. So, some films aren't as terrible as we think, and we're all very keen to jump on hearsays and production histories. And one of the things I do pick up is I don't think Poltergeist is Spielberg's movie. There's a lot of Spielberg in it, but he was shooting E.T. at the time. So that I sort of tried to reevaluate Poltergeist as a Tobe Hooper movie, and there's actually quite a lot in it that's a Tobe Hooper movie. And then I saw Life Force the other day for the first time.
Really?
And yeah, I'd never seen it before.
Yeah, it was fantastic, I think.
Yeah, I was surprised how slightly slick it was. It was obviously a Canon movie, so you can see the budget sort of trickling away under the screen. But I thought there was even some of the imagery and the effects that felt very Poltergeist, and it just made me think, maybe Tobe Hooper did. There was more of a Tobe Hooper stamp on Poltergeist than not. So that's one of the things I try and look at. Just try and combat some widely held opinions that have become the official history, or sometimes they're not.
Yeah, as you say, with Life Force, there is a lot of it. There's a lot in that shows that Toby had the skill to sort of produce a big budget movie, because he'd always beforehand been sort of known as this kind of horror director. And I think probably I think maybe it's probably a genre he was trying to move away from slightly, but this was more, it was Life Force, a fantastical kind of movie with different genres all thrown into one. With zombies and vampires, everything. It's
and if you
brilliant.
look at Salem's Lot, the Warner's TV sort of miniseries he did almost prior to Poltergeist, there's a lot of Poltergeist in that movie, and obviously Spielberg has those tropes of domesticity that I really sort of celebrate and look at in the book. The kitchen tables, the kids' bedrooms, but that's all in Salem's Lot as well, and then with Poltergeist, but Poltergeist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think, share a lot of tropes. One being it's a house almost in plain sight. It's a house that society has ignored. We've got a last act heroine not wearing much, running about in utter terror, going up and down corridors. We've got a 15-year-old daughter of the Freeling family who's slightly coming on and playing, goading the guys building the pool. That's, to me at the time, that is not a Spielberg trope at all. It just feels a lot more of a Tobe Hooper film.
Your book kind of finishes on the discussion with Jaws.
Yes.
Sort of big segment on that. I mean, obviously it's a film that you didn't see at the cinema. You weren't even born.
I was born as it was still in the charts.
That's right.
Yeah, so I like the sort of poetry of that.
Yeah. So did you come Jaws 3D? Was it? Do you think everyone around you, sort of even kids at school, just like, this looks rubbish, or was it just everyone just like excited to see Jaws 3D?
They did a Jaws 3D, right? I didn't know this. No. I remember thinking, when Jaws is, even as a kid, when Jaws is on shredded wheat packets, something's
wrong.
obviously
Yeah.
Bond did that, and Danger Mouse and those Weetabix characters you talk about, they had sort of serial packet status. But I remember when Jaws 3D was those awful sort of green and red psychedelic images of the film. I thought, yeah, that's not that's. And again, I didn't see it because it probably didn't come to our local cinema, so I don't think I saw that until it was on rental. Yeah, I would have rented it out.
It's a funny thing, as you said near the beginning, was that a lot of these films don't get shown, even though you have this kind of, I think the internet itself, it had this kind of strong belief that a lot of these films were very much just widespread. You could see it as easily as we can now, but back then it was very much, I suppose, luck of the draw. I suppose if your local flea pit cinema would play, the sequel to whatever film,
there was, and the films would not always come out at your local cinema on the day of release. I mean, maybe, yes, the big Star Wars Return of the Jedi definitely came out on the day of release because it was sort of monetary suicide to not do that. But sometimes a film would, especially if you imagine your local cinema has one screen, it wouldn't cope now with all the multiple movies that come out. But to sort of rub up against Secret of Nim and Tron. And there was always other films because cinemas would often go with what the adults wanted to watch. So suddenly your local flea pit would not have, Jaws 3 or Masters of the Universe. It would be The Colour Purple, or I'm trying to think of some word, or Terms of Endearment. That was always on at our local cinema. I would keep bouncing back. I'm like, can we just show Octopussy again? I don't care about Terms of Endearment.
Okay, Mike, what was the greatest year of the 80s for you? Was it 1982 or was it, say, maybe 1984?
Cinematically, it's a difficult one. Yeah, I've been asked this before, and then I go away thinking, well, no, what about 87? I think 82, there was a lot of demons in my family at the time, which the book goes into, a lot of divorce sort of scenarios. E.T.'s is quite a divorce movie itself, and for me personally, and I sort of go into that in the book. But I do, 82. We've all done it. You can all reel it off. 84. No one ever says 86 though, do they?
I can't think of anything. 86 is probably something like
Golden Child.
Big Trouble in Little China.
Police Academy.
There's maybe 5 films that year probably that we can probably remember and go, that was a good year. But when you look at 84 and I would probably say 82, which has the most big hits.
The ones of quality, not just the ones we remember fondly that are a bit terrible. 82, you've got The Thing, Tron, E.T., Poltergeist, Evil Dead. 82. And that's, I was slightly aware of that when doing the book, that I think the 80s changed around 83, 84. That corporate Gordon Gekko, yuppie, white goods era of the 80s, that sort of came in about 84, 85, and the movies started to change a little bit. Even The Goonies, it has that Spielberg domesticity that E.T. has and Jaws has and Close Encounters has. But then suddenly those Amblin movies are worrying about property developers, like Batteries Not Included as well. And there's a sort of monetary cynicism creeps in. So that's what I wanted to do in the book, is just keep that window sort of contained. So that's why it sort of ends at 84, but then still looks at Force Awakens and the new Ghostbusters and those films, reincarnations down the history timeline.
Yeah, because there's a big section on Star Wars. I mean, so Aussie say with Force Awakens and the sort of discussion on the prequels. Do you find yourself a prequels apologist, or do you think you were just heartbroken when you saw those films?
No, not at all. No, I'm not an apologist. I can see what is wrong with them. I just don't think they're that terrible. I would have done it all differently. I think one of the shocks of Phantom Menace was it had a little kid in it that reminded us of, we were that kid when we were into Star Wars, and that was a bit jarring. Sorry, excuse the bad pun, but that was a bit jarring and a bit odd. I would have started those films with Anakin sort of turning 20. I would have cast an actor as Anakin. Who knew that could have been an idea.
That's true. I agree with you on
There's
that.
a lot of ideas. They missed the whole beats because the original trilogy is all, to me, it's all about threes. You know, three characters, three acts. There's a sort of palette of three colours, and then suddenly the prequels become these overstretched. This overstretched saga of trade union disputes, and it's all a bit Jeremy Corbyn in Liverpool. It's all a bit, we will get the unions to vote on this. And I'm like, that's not a Star Wars movie. I get why it's there, but I think the prequels are fine, and oddly, I think time will be good to them. If you watch Sith, Rogue One, and New Hope in that order, they're actually, there's a sense to that. There's a placement to it.
I mean, do you think now, with how Star Wars, the most recent ones, have been received, and I think there's sort of change of attitude for Disney, how they're pushing forward with Star Wars. Do you think there's kind of Star Wars burnout? I mean, did you ever experience Star Wars burnout growing up, or did you always just had a huge passion for it? Because there was a point, wasn't there, late 80s, Star Wars wasn't cool anymore. It wasn't in the mainstream.
What do you mean? But the Battle for Endor was... It had,
when you said in the book, it was like the bottom shelf of the VHS store or something, Battle of Endor. I was like, same here.
I mean, Star Wars was every 3 years, and when you're a kid, that's an immense amount of time.
It is.
And Star Wars did feel like Christmas. It felt like a proper event, and now with... I get and understand the sort of release pattern of the new era of Star Wars movies, but they sort of feel like bank holidays when they should actually feel like Christmas Day. And I think Solo really suffered for that, because bearing in mind, Solo came out not long after Last Jedi came out, on DVD, Blu-ray. So we were still in that Star Wars way. I think I had Solo actually come out this Christmas. I think even that year gap may have benefited it in its response. I think it's I'm not a fan of Solo. I need to see it again. I've seen it a few times already, and I felt perhaps Solo was the one where they dropped the ball, and it had nothing to do with the change of directors. I just think the script was focusing on the wrong things, and it wasn't even Alden Solo. I didn't have a problem with him. I just thought, can we have him solo? He's called Solo, but he's always just tagging along with others. And that's just me. And I don't think Last Jedi is that. I think it's a fine film, actually. To end a Star Wars movie, and none of us quite know what's happening next. That's quite a risk.
I don't think even the filmmakers know. I don't think even the filmmakers know what's happening next. That's the thing. I think, and with Abrams, I think Abrams had set things up, but I think he was a little bit annoyed that they'd gone that direction. But as I say, with the 80s, did you ever fall out of love with Star Wars? Doing sort of the 90s and stuff, how new films were coming out, or different mediums like new video games and stuff like that, were sort of taking people's attention away from the old movies of the past.
Well, I was never a gamer, so I never those sort of Star Wars. If you mean the sort of Star Wars computer games, they never sort of reignited much for me. I just assumed we'd never see them again. I just assumed that's what they were. And I remember it was around 1990, 91. Some of the film mags would be talking about Lucas auditioning young actors for Anakin Skywalker. And I thought, oh, okay. And even then I thought we'll never see them, though. I just assumed they were what they were. And there was other things that would come along. Indiana Jones, that filled that 84 to 89 gap a little bit. And also I love the Star Trek movies. They sort of filled my sort of sci-fi void, whatever that might be. With that sort of Genesis trilogy. And even I quite liked Star Trek 5 and 6. And the Back to the Future movies. There was always something.
There's always something to fill the void, wasn't there? I suppose. Yeah. I mean,
and not every film will stand up and be, Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back, and nor should it, because that's what keeps those films sort of elevated.
Yes. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you, Mark, for coming on the show.
Not at all.
If you're interested in Mark's book, you can find a link below, and you can find him on social media. That's it for now, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.